Back to the deep dive.
Today, we're taking a deep, focused look at the Advent hymn, O Come, O Come, Emmanuel. I mean, this is a piece of music that is so ancient, so beautiful, and it's also, I think, deceptively simple.
It really is.
Our listeners sent us this compelling stack of sources, articles, theological essays, scriptural notes, and they all sort of center on one big challenge. Can we get past the melody and really grasp the immense historical and spiritual weight that's carried by the 6 titles for the Messiah that are hidden in those lyrics?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're digging into. This whole deep dive is about synthesis. We're trying to figure out what these names, Emmanuel, Rod of Jesse, Dayspring, Key of David, Lord of Might, and Desire of Nations, what they truly meant to the people who first longed for them.
And how that fulfillment changed everything.
Right, and how it revealed this powerful, kind of counterintuitive shift in understanding. It's like a roadmap of changing expectations. And that idea, expectation, that's so key here. The sources all emphasize that this hymn is just this profound expression of longing, and not just, religious longing, but that deep human yearning for rescue, for justice, for order. And the advice that kept coming up in the material is vital. Do not rush this. We have to take the time to step back, put our baggage up to God, and walk with the Spirit through this feeling of waiting.
And only by understanding the depth of these titles can you really appreciate the answer to that longing. If we can get a handle on the tension between what was expected and what actually arrived, we unlock the whole meaning of the song.
So let's start at the very beginning of that longing.
Let's do it.
We have to begin with the most familiar and I think the most potent title, O Come, Emmanuel.
Right.
On the surface, the translation is simple enough. It's Hebrew for God with us. But for centuries of people living under occupation, this name, it was an explosive political statement.
It was everything. We trace this promise back to the prophet Isaiah, specifically Isaiah 7.11, which announces, "Behold, a virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel."
And Matthew's gospel picks that up directly.
It does. It links Christ directly to this defining promise. But you have to understand the context.
It was a world of oppression.
Absolutely. The sources remind us that the people of Israel were perpetually living under the boot of one empire after another. You had the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, and then, of course, the Romans.
So they were waiting in this state of spiritual and political exile. They wanted physical rescue.
Exactly. From death and destruction and a visible, triumphant return to power, like it's described in Isaiah 35 and 51.
So they weren't just praying for some gentle presence. They were praying for a military intervention.
That's the key. The dominant theological idea had really solidified into this militant expectation. The Messiah would be a conquering king.
A new exodus.
A new exodus. God would come with a visible, unmistakable army of angels, and he would smash the Roman Empire and restore Israel's political sovereignty. That was their blueprint for God with us, God intervening for us, violently, politically.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the fulfillment of that prophecy just completely redefines what salvation even looks like.
The contrast is it's staggering. I mean, if you're waiting for God to show up on a war horse with legions of angels, the reality of God arriving as a vulnerable infant is, it's profoundly unsettling.
Right.
God came not to slay the external enemy with a sword, but to confront and, as one source put it, slay what was in the heart of the world itself, the sin, the corruption, the spiritual darkness.
So he didn't send an army.
He came down himself, stepped into humanity, and lived a complete, perfect, and righteous life alongside us.
And this gives us such a crucial insight into why he faced so much resistance. You can imagine being a devout Jewish leader, studying these prophecies, your whole life totally dedicated to hope of national liberation.
And you're looking at this guy and you're thinking, where's the throne? Where's the army? This is just some rando from a small village near Galilee.
Yeah.
Their very real, very deep political longing basically blinded them to the quiet internal power of God, literally dwelling among them. They were just far too quick to turn away because it didn't match the blueprint.
That profound disappointment, that their conquering king didn't arrive, it sets up this need for a fresh start. And that brings us to the next title. O come, thou rod of Jesse. We know Jesse was King David's father, so that establishes the lineage. The prophecy from Isaiah 11.1 says, a shoot from the stump of Jesse shall come forth.
And that language is so important, a shoot from the stump.
Right.
The sources really emphasize this. It wasn't just a genealogical marker. I mean, why mention Jesse, the root, instead of David, the golden standard of the king?
Because the Davidic line, for all its glory, had failed.
It had failed. It ended in corruption, exile, national downfall. It was cut down. It was a stump, dead wood.
So if the original longing was for a return to the glory days of King David, the prophecy is basically saying, no, the whole tree has to be regrown.
Precisely. The stump signifies absolute hopelessness, dynastic defeat. Jesus isn't just a continuation of some tired old line. He represents a total, miraculous renewal. He triumphs over the structural corruption and death that ended the old covenant kingdom.
The rod of Jesse is about rebirth.
Rebirth through Christ. And this rebirth has, ethical implications for us for how we're supposed to live.
Okay.
The sources point to Isaiah 11.2, which talks about the characteristics of the shoot, the fruit of the Spirit. But crucially, the verses right after that describe a restored kingdom where the lion lies down with the lamb. It's the ultimate picture of reconciliation.
So if we connect that back to the first section, the expectation of a military victory.
Yeah.
The rod of Jesse is telling us that the war we're fighting isn't against Rome.
It's an internal war against hostility itself. Following the rod of Jesse means pursuing that against the grain life now, loving your enemies, extending grace. It demands we embody that peaceful, reconciled kingdom rather than waiting for some external military force to impose it.
So the first two titles deal with identity and lineage. The next one seems to bring us into spiritual clarity. O come, thou dayspring. Literally, it means sunrise. But what's the deeper personified meaning of Christ as the dayspring?
The dayspring is that moment when clarity just breaks through the deepest confusion. The sources highlight that the long period right before Christ was called the 400 years of silence.
When the prophetic voices just stopped.
They stopped. People were spiritually and intellectually lost. They were, walking in profound darkness.
The symbolism there is really powerful.
It's so rich. While the West often symbolizes the place of God, where the temple was, the East, where the sun rises, it symbolizes the far-flung regions of spiritual exile. So the sun rising in the east signals that light is breaking into the farthest, most forsaken places.
So the darkness wasn't just physical night. It was the darkness of the mind and the soul.
Correct. And the scripture just solidifies this. Luke 1 praises God that the sunrise or dayspring from on high shall visit us to give light to those who sit in darkness. This is rescue through illumination.
We see that in Isaiah too, right? Isaiah 9.2. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light.
Exactly. It's the promise of knowledge, the end of confusion, the spiritual night is being lifted. Malachi promised that the sun of righteousness will rise. And then, of course, John 8.12 confirms this final identity when Jesus says he is the light of the world.
So dayspring means the spiritual blindness that kept people from recognizing Emmanuel is now being forcefully lifted.
That's it.
This illumination then allows us to understand the next concepts, which move us toward the actual structure of the Messianic kingdom. If the rod of Jesse gave us that pure foundation, the next titles address the sovereign authority and the law it operates under.
Right.
Let's start with O come, thou key of David, or clavis David. A key means access. It means control, ownership.
That's absolutely right. The authority here is defined in Isaiah 22.22. I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David. What he opens, none can shut. And what he shuts, none can open.
That sounds like absolute authority.
It is. Ultimate, unquestionable. And this kind of power is precisely what the people were longing for, the authority to control their own destiny, to drive out the Romans.
Yes, but again, the fulfillment transforms how that power is used.
Exactly. It's crucial that Christ himself claims this title in Revelation, declaring that he holds this power of the key. But the sources highlight that this authority isn't for domination or imprisonment, which is how political power usually works.
It's a master key used to unlock.
The authority is for service. Specifically, as Luke says, release for the captives. So the key doesn't just represent the right to rule, it represents the power to liberate. It's the authority to redefine who is trapped and who is free.
That structural authority transitions pretty seamlessly into the source of that power. O come, thou Lord of might, Adonai. This title carries immense theological weight beyond just simple strength.
Oh, this is where we anchor Christ's identity in the divine. The term Adonai signals absolute sovereignty and control. For the Jewish people, this title immediately connected the figure to the very beginning of the covenant.
To the giving of the law itself.
To Mount Sinai. Exactly. This is the memory of God descending in fire and smoke on Sinai, giving the Ten Commandments. It evokes that powerful covenant-making declaration in Exodus. I am sending Moses.
So by calling the Messiah Lord of Might, the hymn is asserting that this figure isn't just a king in David's line.
He is the sovereign, covenant-making God.
And this solves the problem of the law. If God is the lawgiver, the Messiah has to have that same divine authority to fulfill it and judge it.
It confirms his divine identity and his total role. Isaiah 33 summarizes it perfectly. The Lord is our judge, our lawgiver, our king. And Matthew 5:17 confirms it. Christ didn't come to abolish the law from Sinai, but to fulfill it completely.
So he is both the authority who unlocks freedom, the key of David, and the embodiment of the perfect standard, the Lord of Might.
Perfectly put.
Okay, so we've traced this journey from political exile to renewal, illumination, and divine authority. And this brings us to the final really sweeping title, O Come, Desire of Nations, or Desiderium Gentium. This title must have been the most challenging for the original exiled people to accept,
I think so.
because it expands the promise way beyond their own borders.
It directly challenged the prevailing nationalist expectations. I mean, if the entire longing was centered on liberating Israel, this title asserts that God's plan was never parochial, it was always universal.
And that's in the Old Testament too.
It is. It's deeply rooted. Haggai 2.7 stated, "The desired of all nations shall come." This concept was radical. It was a prophecy of global recognition, like in Isaiah 2, which speaks of all nations streaming to the mountain of the Lord.
So it implied the Messiah wasn't just coming to free Israel from Rome.
But to gather every human tribe under one single banner.
So the fulfillment is reconciliation, not just redemption for one chosen group.
That is the most critical implication. Christ's mission was to break down the wall of hostility that divided humanity, the wall between Jew and Gentile, slave and free, male and female. Ephesians uses that imagery of Christ dismantling the very structures of division that separate us.
So the long wait, that intense longing, was always meant to culminate in unifying the entire global human family.
Yes, the desire of nations asserts that the Messiah is the universal king. And that culminates in the declaration from Philippians that every nation, every knee will bow at Jesus' name. It's the grand finale of the whole plan.
Wow.
So what does this all mean for us today? We started this deep dive with that ancient exiled longing embodied in the promise of Emmanuel. And we've traced that understanding through 6 names that progressively revealed this dramatic theological roadmap.
Yeah, it's a clear progression from waiting in physical exile to experiencing spiritual rebirth through the rod of Jesse.
Right.
Getting clarity through Dayspring, understanding the keys liberating authority, recognizing the supreme nature of the Lord of Might.
And finally, witnessing global reconciliation as the desire of nations.
The overarching lesson from all these sources seems to be this profound redefinition of power. The original longing was for a military conquest, to dismantle an external empire.
But the fulfillment delivered an internal transformation. A quiet, perfect life that slays the hostility within our own hearts and within the world. The expectation of external might was met with internal perfection.
And that shift brings us right back to the relevance for you, the listener, especially during this time of waiting and longing. These titles confirm that the path of spiritual growth isn't always one of immediate, thunderous political victory.
It's one of slow, deep internal change.
And that brings us to the application message from the source material. Do not rush. Take the time to step back and pray. Give yourself a moment to put your burdens up to God and just walk with the Spirit during this time of intense longing. The King is already here.
Just not in the way anyone expected.
So if the seekers of old were looking for a king with a sword to physically dismantle an empire, how does the fulfillment, the quiet, perfect life that ultimately slays what was in the heart of the world itself, how does that redefine the very concept of power and might for us today?
That is something for you to mull over as you encounter the source of that great longing.